This is my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Okay, so shortly after the new stand that appeared, later revealed to be sheer heart attack, a secondary stand attached to Yoshikage Kira's left hand, or at least it's increasingly implied and then outright stated in the end of the episode. But it's heavily implied and later outright confirmed that the new stand called sheer heart attack is actually attached to Yoshikage Kira's left hand and by extension his stand killer queen. And sure enough, sheer heart attack goes off in an explosion and destroys the shopkeeper utterly and entirely and is completely vaporized. At which point Koichi and Jotaro realize why they couldn't find Shigechi, because there was nothing to find. And to make matters worse, during the explosion, Yoshikage Kira actually escaped with his suit, with his tailored buttons and his suit, and escaped out the back door, and now they can't find him. And Koichi immediately points out that they need to chase after him before he gets away. But Jotaro points out that they shouldn't do this for two reasons. First off, that he was able to basically deduce what kind of person Yoshikage Kira was just by his jacket, and was able to conclude what kind of profession he has, his marital status, his age, and a whole bunch of other things just by observing the jacket. And although he doesn't have a name, but he does conclude that they were able to now successfully narrow down their search, but from what they've learned by his jacket. And when though Koichi points out that that's more than enough evidence to go after, and they should probably go after him, since even if they do have information that they shouldn't just let him get away. Jotaro reveals the second reason why he doesn't want to leave the room. As it turns out, sheer heart attack survived the explosion and is now still going. And Jotaro concludes that sheer heart attack, because it's connected to Yoshikage Kira, won't leave them alone until they too are completely vaporized. And points out that there's a reason Yoshikage Kira has been uncaught in Morio for 15 years. He doesn't leave any evidence behind, and they're evidence as it would turn out. And Koichi is a little bit annoyed at Jotaro, mainly because he feels like Jotaro is underestimating his stand and its capabilities, and concludes that he could very well use his stand to chase after him and at the very least get a glimpse of what he looks like. But as he's contemplating doing that, sheer heart attack suddenly appears and attacks Koichi, and at which point Jotaro summons Star Platinum to defend him and knocks it into the floor. But it keeps going and is about to explode, so Jotaro stops time to also again attack it. And he also manages to knock it away again. But it doesn't work, and because Jotaro quickly realizes that it's far sturdier than it has any right to be. At which point Koichi kind of gets fed up with it again, as Jotaro is starting to basically get on Koichi's nerves at this point. Koichi is feeling like he's being neglected a little bit because Jotaro seems to be underestimating his stance capabilities and what it's doing, but where in actuality Jotaro is just kind of very much looking out for Koichi and taking a very logical approach to try and keep Koichi safe. At which point the stand attacks him again, and Jotaro knocks it out the window with another punch. Although by this point his fists are starting to bleed from the knuckles and he's badly injured. At which point Koichi decides he's tired of doing nothing basically. Despite Jotaro warning him multiple times to keep his stand close so that he can defend himself, uses his stand to try and at the very least to conclude where the stand user actually is. Although as Jotaro points out, it's a remote sheer heart attack is a remote stand, and no amount of searching will work, because even if the range is what Koichi thinks it is, it's an automatic stand and most likely will just keep going until it's either destroyed or just successfully kills its opponent. Koichi of course doesn't listen and tries to go after Yoshikage Kira anyway, pointing out that his stand has enough range that he should be able to suss out where Kira actually is, and concludes that the murderer is indeed leaving the shop, but also concludes that Jotaro was right and that the stand is slowly moving away from him. And he's slowly moving away from the stand, and basically he realizes that sheer heart attack is automatic, like Jotaro said, and indeed Jotaro even mocks this up to his years of fighting stand users, and knows for a fact that that's how it works, since he's fought several different types of stand users, and that was the most likely situation. And Koichi now flustered about the fact that he wasn't able to actually catch up to the murderer before he got away. Begins to basically become agitated and get heated under the collar. At which point the stand toward him instead of Jotaro and targets Koichi instead. At which point Jotaro has all the information he needs to actually stop it. Koichi of course isn't able to defend himself and says outright to Jotaro that he's failed him and that he's sorry. At which point Jotaro concludes what he actually needs to do to stop him, and realizes that it's a heat-seeking stand, uses Star Platinum's time stop to create a fire in stop time, which causes the stand to not only redirect itself from Koichi back to him, but directly at the fire. But since Jotaro is standing directly next to the fire, he gets caught in the explosion and is badly injured. At which point Koichi realizes it was all his fault and is the reason Jotaro is injured, and proceeds to haul him back to the back of the shop, to basically to the back of the shop where the shop owner lived, into the shop owner's living space, to try and get him away and get him to somewhere safe. But he literally has no time to do it because the stand is basically unbeatable at this point. It's demonstrated that it can't be destroyed in a normal way, and is sufficiently sturdy, so it keeps chasing after Koichi and Jotaro. And Koichi is a lot slower now because he has to drag Jotaro's unconscious body with him as he goes. And Koichi isn't entirely happy about this, but he eventually realizes that he can use the shop owner's living quarters to his advantage as well. And he turns on all the lights, which are all heat lamps, which cause the stand to target the lamps instead of Koichi and Jotaro, and proceeds to do that. At which point Koichi eventually gets to the back door, which happens to be in the man's kitchen, and decides that he can continue to distract sheer heart attack by turning on the stove and throwing hot water into the corner, only to realize that the stove is an electric stove and will take a while to heat up, and the pitcher that he thought had hot water in it was actually empty. Sure enough, the stand doesn't stop its assault and continues to move forward and targets Koichi and Jotaro. At which point Koichi begins to panic, realizing that he has no idea what to do. But then he remembers Jotaro's advice about being more observant and actually watching his surroundings and trying to figure out weaknesses based on that. At which point he finally realizes that the stand's ability to track heat could be used as a weakness, and uses Echo's Act 2 to basically put a sizzle lure on a tailpiece onto the stand's face, which basically causes it to go around in circles because he uses the ability sizzle. He uses the word sizzle and uses that as a lure to keep the stand in place so that they can basically trap it. And with the crisis seemingly averted, he immediately goes to the phone nearby and calls up Josuke to let him know what happened, and catches him up to speed. But as he's doing that, and as he's trying to calmly explain to Josuke what happened, Koichi realizes too late that the hot plate for the stove is actually faulty and turns on and off by itself, which causes the stand to realize that it's to basically target the stove instead of the little lure on its head, and explodes that up. And Koichi barely has enough time to get himself out before it explodes. At which point Koichi realizes he's cornered in the back alley behind the shop, and tries to summon Act 2 to defend himself. but is then thrown for a loop when Act 2 doesn't come, and sheer heart attack isn't stopping its advance. At which point he looks over and sees the husk of Act 2 lying on the ground, and believing that it actually died because of the explosion, and begins to cry, but then remembers that's not how this works, and realizes that his stand actually does this when it's about to evolve and when he grows as a person. And sure enough, instead of Act 2, he discovers that his stand has actually evolved into Echo's Act 3. And Echo's Act 3 is, it has its own personality. It evolves to the point where it's able to actually not only is it able to hold an intelligent conversation with its stand user, i.e. Koichi, but it's also intelligent enough that it's able to make its own decisions to a point. Although it doesn't, and though Koichi isn't quite and sure enough, it asks Koichi for advice on the current situation and to give it orders. And Koichi isn't entirely sure what Echo's Act 3 is capable of doing, so he just has it attack and defend himself and Jotaro for now, and while he thinks of a plan and tries to actually get a read on what its abilities are. And sure enough, Echo's Act 3 does exactly that, demonstrating its incredible power and speed, and almost an unseeable speed in front of Koichi, and Koichi realizes that they're probably going to be fine. At which point Echo's Act 3 employs its new signature ability, 3 Freeze, on the stand and performs the stand rush on it, but is blown back by the stand's sheer defensive capabilities and lands on its butt, basically. And Koichi is a little bit miffed at the fact that its attack basically did nothing, and realizes that he's still screwed, and tries to drag Jotaro away and basically berates his stand, telling him that it told him to protect him. But the stand reveals that it did, and case in point, while its attacks did basically nothing, it then sinks into the ground, as it turns out, 3 Freeze is that actually causes anything that it gets hit by Echo's Act 3's attack to basically become so heavy that it can't move. Unfortunately, because Echo's Act 3 did that, Yoshikage Kira quickly realizes something is wrong, as his left hand, because it's connected to sheer heart attack, actually gets a lot heavier as a result, and collapses through the cafe table that he's sitting at while he's waiting for sheer heart attack to finish off his foes for him, and he quickly realizes that he needs to go retrieve sheer heart attack before it becomes a problem, and with that, he resolves to go do that. So yeah, big thing happened in this episode, namely that because of this fight against sheer heart attack, Koichi's stand evolved again. This time into a sentient stand called Echo's Act 3, and Echo's Act 3 is interesting. Not only is it sentient and one of the few stands that are able to actually give advice to their stand user, but it's also shown to be able to basically paralyze whatever's in front, is in front of it by making it heavier. So yeah, the big thing in this episode is that Koichi grows more as a person, which causes him to have developed a new sub-power of his stand. Basically, his stand evolves further. And also in this episode is shown that Jotaro's ability to freeze time has gotten stronger since he started actively fighting stand users again, and is actively using the power. So it's implied that he has gotten stronger in the time since he started using his stand more regularly again. Yeah, it was implied that he can only stop time for a second or two, but he's gotten more power, but has now gotten more powerful again, and has started to regain his original 5 seconds. Basically, it wasn't enough to save Koichi and himself, but it is shown that he is getting a bit stronger again, and also his wisdom here is also what causes Koichi to more develop again as a person, because of his abilities and his time fighting stand users. He's able to give Koichi some sound advice to actually defeat the stand, instead of just rushing headlong into it like Koichi ultimately wound up doing, which is kind of stupid, but he eventually does learn from it. And it's because of that Koichi was able to evolve his stand. So yeah, that's basically what the first point of this episode was, to show that Jotaro is served as a mentor to Koichi, and even though Koichi didn't really get along with him at first, and it was because of Jotaro's sage wisdom that Koichi was able to evolve his stand and become more powerful, and also grow more as a person. So, yeah, but yeah, they are going to have to contend with Yoshikage Kira at some point because Yoshikage Kira needs to go retrieve his sub-stand, basically. His stand is now being weighed down into the pavement, and he realizes something is wrong, so now he realizes he needs to go retrieve it directly, which is going to cause him to come into confrontation with the Joestar group, because now he has to show his face to them to retrieve his stand. And that's going to be an interesting set of circumstances, because his whole thing is that he's trying to keep his quiet life. He's trying to make sure there's no evidence so that he can actually get away scot-free from all of his crimes, but now he may have to break that rule in order to go retrieve his stand. So, yeah, that's going to be interesting going forward. But in any case, that's my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook and on Twitter in the description below. And also, be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It really helps me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that I'm always saying thanks. So be sure to check those out in the description below as well. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!